Okay. Member Downs?
Here.
Member Kerr?
Yes. Here.
Member Marks?
Yes, here.
Member Parsley?
Here.
And Chair Grossman.
Here. Okay, we'll begin with the approval for the minutes of our September meeting, September 4th. Can I have a motion?
I move to approve.
Okay, any problems or questions or concerns? So can I have a second?
I'll second.
And all in favor of accepting the minutes?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No? Okay. Public comments? No? Okay. So any announcements? Isabel, do you have a?
Yes, just wanted to make the Commission aware of the 6th Bay Area Senior Health Policy Forum on Tuesday, December 3rd, 2019. It's an all-day event put on by Unlock and Center for Elders Independence, and it's in South San Francisco. I have a postcard. I'm happy. I'll pass it along for you to look at, but I thought, actually this came from Vice Mayor McQuaid, and wanted to make sure that you got the information, especially for the subcommittee.
Okay. Anyone else? I wanted to mention, I think there'll be several meetings coming up. The BART has decided to move forward with the plan to eliminate parking at the BART stop and
El Cerrito Plaza.
El Cerrito Plaza and build housing. So I imagine there'll be quite a lot of discussion about that in the next few months and the consequences of that choice. And other than that, let's move on to our discussion topics for the evening, starting with Aging in Place Subcommittee. We did.
Oh,
Okay.
no, if the public wants to talk about something not on the agenda.
Yeah, I did that.
Oh, you did?
Nope.
Okay.
So, sure. So we're kind of at the beginning stages of looking at a couple of different things. We have some information from Berkeley and from Alameda County. And then in kind of looking at this, it's kind of opened up a lot more questions than we originally had anticipated. We have what we were able to glean was this graph from, this is from Alameda County. And it had some census numbers. This is their older adult profile from 2010, was it 2010 to 2017? 2015 to 2017, when they applied to the World Health Organization and AARP for the designation for age-friendly city. So in looking at this, it just kind of goes over some of the, apparently some of the surveys that they did within the city. We don't really know how they got this information. And then this brought up a lot of other questions and ideas of how to reach out and get this information. Which in and of itself is somewhat of a problem. If, specifically just using the senior center limits us to getting this information. But we do, both Margie and I felt we do need some type of survey to look at what are the concerns of the aging community. But in addition to that, we felt that we needed a little bit more direction from council with regards to, aging in place is a very broad topic and it covers a lot of different things. So kind of what the council was looking at. Is it the designation from the World Health Organization, AARP/Age-friendly cities? That is, in looking at several different applications to the organizations for that designation, pretty basic. It's pretty basic. It's just answering questions. So I'm not quite sure if that's the direction we go, or if it's the council is looking at policies or ordinances, things of that nature. So I think we are trying to set up a meeting with some council members to discuss this further and hopefully get their thoughts on it. And what direction they see this going. So there are a lot of factors already in looking at some of the designations or some of the questions that were answered on the applications from Alameda County and from the city of Berkeley. A lot of the things we do currently with our own senior center, with Albany Cares, would qualify for that designation of age-friendly city. But what we want to try to see if there's something more that the council is looking for when it comes to this. So that's kind of where we are now. It's just the graph is just, it was kind of interesting to look at the population growth, how it dips and then goes back up, and then it's kind of dipping again. And yeah, and then just looking at some of the concerns listed here, were some very, I mean, they have the top 10 concerns and top 10 resources lacking. 3 out of the top 10 are housing, and the other 3 out of the top 10 are financial. So I think that, I mean, it's pretty clear that those 2 are the top priorities, at least on this survey. And I can't imagine that housing, that would have changed at all. So I think we're going to be hopefully meeting with 1 or more council member within the next few weeks to try to get a little bit more direction, and then hopefully look at some ideas that other cities have done. I mean, there is no way we can match what Alameda County, their budget, nor the city of Berkeley's. I mean, they have a, and I don't think that's the expectation of council. I mean, they have whole staffs. They have whole departments of aging. You know, the senior center is a division of Parks and Rec. I mean, this is a whole separate, this is a whole agency in and of itself. So and I can't imagine some of the things would work with a city our size. But there are certainly some things that we can do, and I think that's what our goal is to look at right now.
Can I just add?
Yeah.
This was a survey that was done by Alameda County. They surveyed every city in the county, so this is Albany. Mm-hmm. Now, unfortunately for Albany, they only got 39 people to respond, which they say is 1.1% of the senior population. I see. Which Brian and I were looking at it. We thought there was a lot more than 3,000 people over 60 in the city of Albany, but we looked at the housing element, and then we looked at this, and
it's pretty much the same.
yeah, the figures were the same, pretty much. So I guess that maybe, I don't know if that's, well, I'm sure they get it from the census or someplace, right? But, so we really need to, when the city of Berkeley did their plan, they were able, like, this is their plan, so it's very comprehensive, many pages, and they did a survey and got about 3,000 seniors to respond. So I think, you know, we really want a better survey with them. So anyway, that's where we're at. But I thought these were interesting. Housing is the,
Yeah, I don't know if, like you're saying, Bart, I don't know if 40 people out of 3,000 is a good cross-section. I mean, it's
yeah.
and then that, in looking at that kind of brought up to both of us very clearly, we need to do something. If we do a survey, if we move forward on something like that, we have to figure out a better way to do that. And how do we, and it's easy to say we can reach out to the senior center, but not everyone utilizes the senior center. And we can reach out to Belmont Village and other facilities that are located in Albany, but that's still reaching a smaller fraction. And how do we get that information out?
Yeah, well, and also we're talking about aging in place, and the people in Belmont Village are not aging in place. They're seniors in the communities. That's not what we're talking about. I'm curious about affordable housing being a problem, because if we're talking about people who are aging in place, a lot of what we're talking about is people who have houses. They may prefer to downsize, but they're not unhoused, or they're necessarily looking for housing. So I'm not,
Well, downsizing is an issue as well. Yeah. I mean, speaking is from a point of view of the house. My house was my grandparents' house before that. When my grandmother could no longer upkeep the house and became dangerous because of we live on a higher elevation, so there's about 20 steps that are very steep that you have to go up. She had to go to an assisted living facility because she couldn't. Now, there are people that would much rather age in place, and I don't necessarily think the folks at Belmont Village aren't aging in place. They just may need help. So there's downsizing in going from a house in Albany to a place like Belmont Village or a condominium that's not necessarily not aging in place. It's just being able to downsize and still live in the community that you've grown accustomed to, that you want to be in.
And I don't know for a fact. It'd be interesting to find out what proportion of people in Belmont Village actually ever lived in Albany before. I don't imagine a lot of them did, given the price of that facility. It's really fairly upper middle class.
I don't know, if I sold my house, I could afford to live there probably.
Yeah.
I have a couple thoughts. We could spend the next 6 months to a year creating a survey with essentially the same questions, and we could try to come up with maybe 50% of the 4,000 to 5,000 seniors that we have in Albany. Or we could just, and the questions in the survey would most likely reflect some of the same issues that are here. Or we could just maybe move ahead with an action plan absent a survey, assuming that some of this information is accurate and that one of these items would make it to the top of the list. And we could just move ahead with a plan. I hate for us to get hamstrung on replicating information that, while it is probably not even statistically significant, it is still a reflection of the reality that we all know we live in.
Yeah.
So I'm not so sure that another survey is going to give us any new or actionable information. And that's my first thought.
It seems pretty basic.
It is very basic.
It's housing, staying in your house, maintaining your home, things of that nature. So it's pretty basic. and I'll be frank, I don't really know a lot of the programs that they have at the senior centers. Some of the concerns on here, though, are things like including in being included in decisions, support, being able to get fresh food, being able to have somebody be able to shop for them. So I know we have things like Meals on Wheels, and so maybe it's looking at other programs within that. And
Sure. Well, the World Health Organization, the piece that they did on aging in place-friendly communities, has some very distinct categories, and one could almost, rather than do a survey, one could review those categories and see to what extent are we addressing them. Some of the things I was hoping we might see in an action plan, for example, would be things like signage and crosswalks and things like that are very concrete and specific, and you can tell pretty quickly whether they work in a senior-friendly way or not.
yeah, infrastructure.
Yeah.
As well as, my sense from working closely with Albany Cares and the collaboration with the senior centers is there's a real strong sense of isolation by frail elders. And some kind of programming, whether it's a weekly or a biweekly telephone call or some outreach to those individuals who are really literally shut in to their homes. I mean, we don't need a survey to know that we need that.
Yeah. And yeah, a program like that might be more difficult because that's going to be probably a volunteer-based, something like that might be volunteer-based.
It could be based at a senior center.
And there's already a program that offers this type of service. It's a senior center without walls. And they do phone calls. They invite seniors to participate in activities over the phone, do conference calls, and seniors can sign up and participate in that program.
That exists.
That exists right now. Mm-hmm.
How many participants are there?
Oh, I don't have the details
Yeah.
of that. I just know of the program, that it exists.
I was not aware of it, so I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah,
It's great
that it
news.
exists, and maybe it's more outreach so that people know about that program.
Yeah.
It also might be worthwhile for us to actually have set up a meeting with the senior center.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
And then go over some of the action plan that we can look at to see what services are provided,
And how can we involve concerned neighbors in those programs?
how can we involve, and then how can we maybe expand on those issues or those things that are already being done. There might be a way to look at expanding a program, or like you were saying, something like infrastructure might be slightly more difficult, but it's certainly not undoable. Looking at different things like lighting, and that would be, I think, one of the main issues is maintained and well-lit streets. And I think we're getting better on sidewalks, but lighting is definitely lacking in some neighborhoods. And I think that's the key.
I wonder if any of these plans have, I forget if I'm supposed to press or not press.
Not press.
Not press. Okay. I wonder if any of the plans have standards that are aging specific about kind of what level of light. Do you ever see that in any of them of what, and kind of what kind of markings on crosswalks? Subjectively, I feel like if I feel it's dark, it must be even more so for someone with more.
They were pretty generic.
Yeah.
They seemed to be pretty generic, even in the applications. It was pretty basic this is our plan, what we plan to do. Now, Berkeley's, both Berkeley and Fremont and then Alameda County, all three had action plans. And that Berkeley's was pretty significant. I mean, Alameda County's action plan was nice because it was fairly basic, you know, like 10 items, this is what we're gonna do. Berkeley's was fairly extensive, like multiple pages. Multi-year plan. I mean, it was fairly significant, but it was pretty clear that that was done by staff, by professional staff. So Alameda County's maybe not so much, but it was good, but it wasn't near to the level that Berkeley's was. So, but I actually agree with Judy. I think that these items are basic enough that we can possibly move forward with an action plan. I still believe that we would like to meet with council members to get the direction that they think we should be going in.
And I think you could easily do, you could do some focus groups at the senior center.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, there's a population there that
Yeah,
it isn't everybody, but you know, it's a lot of people.
it is a lot of people.
And I think rather than do a detailed survey, to come at them with maybe, here's the outline of a plan. Here are the things we see as missing. What do you see as missing?
Yeah.
You could do that in a couple-hour focus group kind of model rather than spend weeks doing a survey.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be important to do that because you don't want to come into council with a plan and have somebody in the audience say that has nothing to do with where the problem is. So I think it's important that you get some input like that.
The only thing I would add is that in looking at this, there's the World Health Organization that has this age-friendly community designation. The first item on the Berkeley plan was to get themselves associated with this WHO program. The first thing on the Berkeley plan was to get themselves associated with this program. Now, I talked to Rochelle. Rochelle said, I'm not so, I don't care about that. But if for some reason, other places think it's important, and if we have to do that, then it calls for an evaluation of some sort, which we might already just be able to use this, right? So we wouldn't have to go out and do a whole new evaluation, but we need to talk to this council and see if that's something they want to pursue or not.
It'd be interesting to see if that had any reference to grant money.
What's the benefit?
What's the benefit? What's the benefit versus the cost?
How would you know that the one or two council members you're speaking to represent the whole council's interest? So I'm wondering if it'd be a better approach would be, or a more inclusive approach would be to come up with something to present to the whole council so that you get the feedback of the entire council. I mean, I think there's enough material out there on aging in place that you could decide based on some discussion with senior center staff and some senior center participants, decide, we're going to focus on aging in place, home safety. We're going to try to bring more awareness of the prevention of fall prevention. And this is what we're planning to do. And then you come up with a plan for that, and that's what you present to council. And maybe you pick 2 or 3 initiatives. It doesn't have to be, because the whole idea of aging in place is so large. I think you pick 2 or 3 that are kind of maybe lower hanging fruits that you can get input on from the senior center and senior center participants, and start with that, because otherwise.
Well, I think also it's an ever expanding, aging in place just isn't necessarily these items, right? It's these items right now. All right? In 5 years, it might be something else. So, and I think that's, while I think a lot of our mindset, especially now, is focused on housing for obvious reasons. That in 5 years, that might not be the overwhelming factor for seniors. It might be, like you said, staying in your home. It might be income as a senior. Retirement or pensions and things like that. So that's actually sounds like a very good idea. Is just to move forward with to get together, come up with an action plan, and move forward with the council. In talking also with Robin at the Senior Center and see if we can set up maybe a focus group of some seniors that are willing to talk to us about some of the issues that they're facing, and maybe we can glean some ideas from that.
You can bring them that list of the World Health Organization.
Yeah.
Which are the ones that are most problematic. The other thing that's interesting that I don't know how exactly we would approach it, because it's not just about aging in place. It's about, you've got a population that may be trapped in houses that are too big for them. And at the same time, you've got a younger population that's looking to buy houses. And there are very few houses on the market, partly because people can't leave them, because there's nowhere to go.
Affordable, all right. Anywhere affordable, yeah.
Anywhere affordable, yeah. So it's kind of in the interest of the community to address the problem so that, in fact, those houses can be made available for people.
Well, I also know there's at least one person I know, and she's sitting here tonight, that has said if she could get a grant or something, she could build an ADU onto her house.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be housing for someone.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that.
Yeah, but I mean, it is true that seniors, are taking up a lot of space, and that some of that space is more than they need. I mean, I was, kind of disappointed with what happened with Belmont Village, with the fact that it's so expensive, and it really isn't directed at the kinds of people that live in Albany. It would have been nice, because it would have been a way that people could stay in Albany and downsize, and those houses then could have been available for purchase.
Yeah. There's one additional point that I'd like to make that may be something we can make a recommendation on fairly quickly, or maybe not, depending on what the sense of the commission is. But aging in place and aging in general are not recreational pursuits. And we are in a situation where the managing staff of the senior program and all the aging programs, because that's the source of those, is in the recreation department, and of the city. I certainly don't fault the work of the recreation department. I should sing their praises, and I do. But I think that as we look forward, we might want to think about how we're structured and think about programs that are not necessarily recreational, but that are human service-based as a different administrative process, or perhaps a broadening of the recreation department or something. So there's additional thoughts for us.
The senior center is part of the recreation department?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is a little crazy.
Well, we can have fun with it, but
I can see why it started that way. But, what the senior center is offering is far more than just a recreational program.
And I would say also Albany Cares is also a source of information, because that's where you're probably meeting with a lot of seniors who have needs, and that could probably inform some of the.
which is also sort of free-floating currently in terms of assignment to department. So yeah, there's progress that we could make, in my view, on that account. So.
Does that give you enough for next step?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Well then, onward. Did you want to make a comment? Oh, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Susan Renault, another I'm one of the 3 women here who volunteers at CARES. I just wanted to say that I appreciate all the things you've said, especially Bart and Judy. Those things are really relevant about the housing, and I'd just like to say that if we get to the point where you have a plan that involves going to the homes of these people, volunteers certainly, but we need a caseworker. We need somebody who's authorized to go into homes and to make suggestions. Because we've seen, people who really need to be referred either to mental health or some kind of serious restructuring of their lives. So that's just my suggestion. Oh, and I'd like to know who is running the telephone outreach program?
Oh, the organization is called Senior Center Without Walls, and it's a, let me see, I was looking at it.
So is it run out of the senior center?
What senior center?
It's a program funded by the American Society on Aging, and there are over 60 programs throughout California, and I know one is in Alameda County.
Okay.
So it's not a program that we have at the senior center?
No.
No,
It's a county program.
because it's a county program. It's probably the county that receives funding to provide, and they give it to a specific entity to provide the services. So, and it, just to give you a brief description, Senior Center Without Walls, a non-denominational nonprofit community outreach program sponsored by Episcopal senior communities, offer activities, friendly conversation, and an assortment of classes and support programs on conference calls to elders throughout California who find it difficult to go to a community senior center. So the program is called Senior Center Without Walls. And I know there is a program here in Alameda County. I just don't have the information, but we've advertised it in the past, and
That's good to know about.
It is good to know about, although I would have some questions about how that could be effective at a county level. I mean, I am, after all, a senior aging place, so I have some knowledge about this. And I think if I were to get a phone call from Alameda County, I wouldn't feel particularly.
no, but it's something
But if
that
it was
people register
somebody
for.
calling me from the senior center,
Yeah.
that would be very different.
No, but I don't think that the funding trickles down through the county, but it's given to an organization that serves
I
seniors.
understand, but
So
at
it's,
the county level, it's not at the local level. I think, I think if you're going to reach out to support people, they want to engage with somebody, who's familiar to them, who's part of their community. If they can't get to the senior center, how are they going to get to the county for recreational?
no, they don't need to go to the county. It's by phone. It's by phone, so seniors, they register for a class, and they call into a number, and instead it's like a virtual class, a conference call class. So it's all over the phone. It's for those seniors. So what we did when we provided that information to seniors who were recipients of our Meals on Wheels program, so that they knew about this resource should they want to participate in recreational or classes from their home, from the comfort of their own home, because they had mobility issues that prevented them to come to the senior center. So this is a service available to seniors over the phone.
Did any of them use it?
I don't know. Mm-mm.
I mean, because there are 65 ways to get, go online and have classes, I think people need contact. And I'm not sure, but anyway.
Well, it's a potential resource.
It's a possible resource, but I would rather, I think more about the kinds of things you were mentioning about neighbors, for example, who are aware of somebody who's alone and isolated. And there's a lot of that goes on in this town. very informally, but people don't necessarily know, who's living in that house. They never see that person. So it would be nice to sort of think about how you organize that at the communal level, so that it's coming from your neighbors, from your community.
Yeah. Well, I think we do, I think the city does do that in some ways, with block parties and things of that nature.
Some of that, yeah.
But, yeah, I think that on that level, it's much more difficult because we're getting into more of a societal issue, neighbors and things of that nature that as a city commission that we really can't control.
But we can encourage, we can.
Well, sure, yeah. And then,
We can't do it, but we can recommend that those kinds of programs be developed. And we've done that with some success with Albany Cares.
Yeah.
So, we know that we can sometimes make things happen. Okay, well, anything else anybody wants to say?
No.
All right, then, Housing Subcommittee. Judy and I have been in contact, and we, I've been working on the notion of a housing forum. And in order to do that, Isabel, did the requests for modification, are there copies of that, or?
I didn't get them. Who was supposed to send them to me?
Judy sent it.
I was attempting to forward the completed work plan to you, unfortunately.
Oh, I did not get it.
Okay, well, we can't go anywhere then because we need to have that in place.
Yeah, we need to have it.
When did you send it? When did you?
I believe I sent it on Sunday. Let me go back to my Gmail.
Obviously went someplace other than.
Didn't go there. I forwarded the form itself, and that may have been the problem. In any event, it was a really good revision.
It sounds wonderful.
We could possibly read it, it's not very long.
Why don't we?
Yeah.
Just throw it out there verbally.
So,
Yeah.
proposed amendment to work plan, develop a plan for a housing forum, educate Albany on new housing laws that will impact our city, solicit and explore different voices on how we can be best positioned to respond, learn about the nature of the housing crisis, housing affordability, and the impact of housing costs on homeless. Does the proposed amendment add to the advisory body's overall workload? Yes. How will the extra workload be managed? The answer is we are seeking to increase the size of the commission, so there's a tie-in there. Anticipated timeframe, plan will be completed by March to be implemented in the spring of 2020. There is, or has been, I don't know yet about dates for that thing, but there's a countywide affordable housing week.
Right.
And we were thinking that that would be the appropriate place to have this.
That's in the month of May.
It was in May.
It's in May, usually the second or third week in May.
Okay.
And how it fits in the body's role. The committee's work plan charges us to investigate state and regional housing initiatives to increase affordable housing and to understand the implications for Albany. The forum would be a method to accomplish this task in a useful way for the entire community. Then the pro and con. Pro, increase constructive discussion of future housing directions in Albany and the wider region, learn more about housing and particularly affordable housing, prepare for future changes in housing regulation. The con, some small costs in staging the forum, and some overlap with other commissions, but collaboration would be possible and welcome. So that's what we're proposing to submit to the council. Does that seem acceptable?
And it looks like we could use some little discussion.
Yeah.
Well, I think you should take out the homeless part of it. I mean, having worked in the shower program and at CARES, the homeless housing is so complicated, and so we finally got a couple of our clients into housing, you know, for the first time since I've been working at the shed. It's been over 3 years, right? And it's like really complicated, and so I don't know that you want to put the homeless in, you know, keep it as part of it, because I think housing's a big enough issue in Albany. What's going on with housing, the housing prices and all of that kind, rents and all that, that's a big enough thing that the homeless, I mean, we have this really good caseworker now, and actually we have 1.5 caseworkers that seem to be really working well with homeless, and I think it's just such a big, huge other thing that I don't know if it could be.
Yeah, we're not proposing to get involved in housing the homeless. We were just talking about the impact of housing costs on homelessness. So, you know, how do we?
Yeah, I think the intended audience would be the community at large, and I'm not sure the community at large has enough information to separate those out yet. I think housing and homelessness are conflated in the general commentary and the general discussions that we all have. And the purpose of our education forum would be to help delineate what housing can do and what homelessness is apart from simple housing. Because you're right, it is very much more complicated than 4 walls and a roof. So I think we want to elucidate that, exactly what you're saying.
Okay.
And I wonder if this is a circumstance where just getting the wording precisely right will help people to understand the connection that you're making without raising the very legitimate concern Margie raised. I think this is great, and I think it makes sense to move quickly. The one thing in the context of moving quickly is I wonder if it is wise to tie it to increasing the size of the commission. I mean, I voted for it, I'm for it, but it strikes me that one response would be to say, you've tied this to this thing we haven't acted on. If we act on that, then we'll get to this, and at that point, then we've lost the timing. So I think we should keep pressing to increase the size, but I might be tempted to drop it from this request as a way of not confusing the issue. It seems like if we want this to be going in the spring, like we would like this moving, you know, we would like to make it as impediment-free as possible.
Yeah.
Can you reword that and give
Well, I
us
can indicate that we do have a subcommittee. It would be helpful if we had additional members, but we can still do the work. Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll make that modification.
Thank you. Do we need a motion?
Yes.
So is the potential
The motion is to
motion?
submit the request to the council to amend our work plan to include the housing floor.
Right. And with that, those minor
Yeah.
language revisions.
Okay, second.
Did you move it?
Discussion.
I think Bart made the motion, I think.
It was a collaborative motion.
That's good.
Maybe the public.
Yeah.
Any public comment? Anybody else have any discussion on this at this point? If not, then all in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
That's unanimous. So we will submit the work plan, and I'll get this modification to you. And do you want to have any further discussion at this point about the day? Judy's done some really good thinking about this.
I think we'll hold it until we get an approval from the council to actually amend the work plan. I think any amount of thinking or head scratching that I do is just sort of an exercise at this point, so we'll save that for later.
All right, very good.
Is it clear that we need this approval in order to?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I didn't know if it was.
Again, it's an opportunity for the whole for you to receive feedback from the entire council.
The execution of this is actually consistent with every other housing, every other item on the housing goals. It just is a very specific target, so.
But there'll be some costs associated, so I can see the council will want to consider that.
Yeah, there's going to be some allocation of resources, so council needs to
Yeah.
have a say.
Yeah.
Need a venue and we'll need some food and things.
Whatever, I'll just take this.
Maybe it needs to
Do
speak.
we have any sense that council has looked at the request for expansion? Is that?
We
been
have
on
a
the
date
agenda?
on, what, is it the 21st?
Yeah, a tentative date of October 21st.
So when we get that confirmed, as many of you as can be there that evening, you know, would be a good thing to turn out and show that we're concerned about this. I don't know. I don't understand, frankly, why certain commissions have 7 and some have 5, and there seems to be a sense of not wanting to increase the size of commissions, but I don't know why that's a problem, since it's voluntary. But anyway, we'll see. Okay, so inclusivity subcommittee update. You will remember that we had a discussion about we finished our discussion about the inclusivity impact statements, but we were talking about diversity reports. And I think certainly my experience was that I didn't realize how complicated that could turn out to be and how many issues there were. And so I think we ought to continue to talk about it and move forward at the point that we feel that we're all more or less on the same page. Because we don't know what buttons this will push, and we will need to be, behind it. So I'll turn it back to you guys.
Great. Judy, did you want to say something first on inclusivity or
No, I think we're fine on that. I think we have we're moving ahead with that.
action plan and
Yeah.
hope to be on agenda? So I think the things that at least I took away from our discussion last month and the discussion of diversity reports and the information that the city currently has and the information that we might hope to develop was two things that worked in tension with each other, one of which is a general sense of a recognize of the need to convey information, and a secondness was a concern about the kind of identity categories and how to reconcile those two positions. Since then, there's a couple of other pieces that I've thought about in trying to clarify my own thinking, and then I'll use that to make some suggestions. We also asked Isabel if she'd be willing to talk about the systems that the city uses to obtain information from its employees so that we can understand how and at what points those might be amenable to being, amended for additional information that we or council might want. So one of the other pieces that I'm, working to think through is, what's the best method to build from where we are to where we would like to be, and whether we're going to build more successfully by constructing a scaffold, even if a limited and imperfect one, and using that to show that it can be done and how additional work will fit in so that we can be in a process of continual improvement and possible feedback from the community on how to improve it, or whether we'll be more likely to get where we are by aiming to construct a system that might take a while but meet all of the valid, concerns that were raised. So that's, I think, one issue that floats. What's the way out there? What's the way to get from here to there that we judge imperfectly as we predict the future will have the most likelihood of helping to move us in that direction? And then the other issue is how to think about the fact that the information we're talking about is information that, at least by my lights, really belongs to the people of Albany. And so I'm less comfortable with withholding it, even if we recognize its imperfection in the sense that it was collected with taxpayer money. So it does make me uncomfortable to think that we would take a position of withholding information collected at the city's expense from the people of the city on the grounds that that the very legitimate concerns might lead us to decide that we can have it, but not be disseminating it to them. Of course, we will be disseminating it to them as we include it in agendas. So the ways that I'm thinking through, the steps that I'm thinking through of how we might consider resolving these tensions would be, one, to think about a scaffold, to ask council, to ask staff to devise and post using information, using of a diversity report, using the EEO and census data we have as a starting point. But two, including in there both a disclaimer and a request for engagement, where we state that we recognize that that the categories the federal government doesn't use, that the categories the federal government uses don't reflect the entirety of the categories that the city of Albany or the people of Albany would use, and inviting people to, stating that it's a step toward developing a broader system, and rather than us trying to devise a perfect system, asking people to weigh in both on categories, identities, but also other things to measure that they might want included, in that sense of seeing it as a dynamic and interactive process. Then asking for working with our staff in order to study what are other measures that we can build into, especially the personnel information system, so that we can know what is likely to be available in the systems that we use, how we can build it in, what the timelines of those reports are. And then a plan that, at minimum, we as the SEJC would review these each time that the data is updated. Of course, we could also take it up at other times, and charge the inclusivity subcommittee with continuing to work on the responses to feedback from the community and to developing a sense of what types of categories and questions we would want included as we keep updating. So I recognize the complexity of some of the topics, but I do think that we can build a dynamic system that allows people to feel that they get a chance to weigh in while also getting a chance to see the data that they have paid for.
Yeah, well, that data is a matter of public record, so
Right.
But one of the things that
I'm not sure how they would find it. So I guess literally, I would accept technically what you're saying, but we're aiming to make it easier to find.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how they would find it unless they're very good at going through agendas.
The thing that I think one of the things that might help with some of the tension is if we got past just staff, just hired staff, because that's one set of issues. Who works for the city. But what I'm really interested in is who participates, who's on the commissions, who attends events in the city. In those instances, some of that may be available. Certainly, who's on commissions is available. In terms of who attends events, we maybe need to start collecting that information. Usually, when there's a city event, there's a sign-in. But what I'm interested in a lot is not just whether our staff is representative, but whether the life of the community involves the diversity of people who live here. Because that's, I think, a place where we can have some direct impact, where we can do some outreach, where we can do a better job of recruiting, for example, people for commissions. And it may, if you broaden sort of the pool of information, it may be less focused on the staff, which I think can be an uncomfortable thing for the staff to, have that be the whole focus is
Sure.
here. We have, too many of one kind of person.
So could you clarify what you mean by other events? Let's say, the Saha presentation.
Yeah.
So a lot of people attended that. So what information would you want them to write down on a sign-in sheet or whatever?
I would want to know, what would be of interest to me is whether for example, we have 30% Asian population. Potentially, some of those people may be interested in living in Saha, in that project.
Yeah.
Did they know about it? Did they attend? You know, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
Okay, so how would you get that, though? I mean, I'm having a hard time, like, getting to where you would get that, in, like,
Well, everybody-
without asking for the ethnic code or whatever. I mean, like,
Well, I mean, I'm not sure. I
okay.
mean, you could ask. It might feel a little bit odd to ask somebody to identify their ethnicity.
That's kind of my concern.
Yeah.
And then my other concern is, as commissioners or committee members, we take on a responsibility to, to sign up and join. And there are certain things that come along with that. Our information is all public and whatnot. If I'm attending an event at the city for an event, it feels a little awkward to have to give my papers, to give my information
Yeah.
to the city. There may be certain people that don't want to do that, and what I would not want to see is people get turned off by going to events in the city by constantly having to write down their information or being asked to write down their information. So I'm not sure if that's the best way we could go about doing that. But I mean, I understand the idea behind it. How do we get the most information from the community? I don't know if that's necessarily a road we want to go down with.
And just to follow up on that, Brian, one of the things I think that Greg and I have struggled with is because there is such a, for lack of a better word, a diversity of how you define diversity, that we don't even know what we would best use. Would we use the census designations? Would we use something that's more targeted to our community, which might be more sensitive to just the broad description of Asian population, which is, that tells me nothing. So we haven't even got to the point where we know what we'd ask yet, much less how we would ask it or get it. So I think, just to follow up on Greg's point earlier, that we do have information that is publicly available, although somewhat layered in how to get to it, on how the staff is configured. And I think that should be daylighted, and we should have a better way for the community at large to find that. And I agree, Bart, that that's not the end of it, but it's certainly a beginning. And it may open conversations and willingness of people to self-disclose, either on a sign-in sheet or on some kind of other data gathering tool that we would use further down the line. So I think we both sort of saw the EEOC-4 report as compared to what we know from the census as a starting point. That's biannual, am I correct? So it would only be every 2 years. It would hardly require an ongoing ad hoc subcommittee to address that. But we could, as a commission, request that information come to us and that we then make an effort to make it public in collaboration with city staff. And I think that's our starting point. I really do.
We could do the commissions as well. That's-
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just as people register, they'll apply in this fall, I imagine, is this next cycle of people sending in their applications for commission spots. Is that right?
It's going to be, no, next year.
Next year.
Next year?
Yes.
After the election.
So that's right. So we could ask people as they fill those out to have they can say decline to stay.
Yeah.
But to fill these out, and if they have to fill out, they have to at least submit the form in order to be considered. Is that right? Maybe.
It's voluntary.
think-
Like even the staff information collected is voluntary.
Yes. Okay.
It's provided, it's a form provided when staff is hired, but it is all voluntary information and kept separate from the actual packet the employee's packet. So, but it's used for statistical purposes for the EEOC report.
But we're talking about commissions, and when there is a form that people have to fill out.
Well, it's the same application that you all filled out, so it does not at this
No,
time
but we could add
ask
to it.
for, ethnicity or race or.
And I
Well,
think
that
I
could be a
would
work plan. We
certainly
could work on that.
Support asking, as a step of this, to have that added to, and then also to disclose commission. I'm totally open to the idea of solving the question of how to get information about other utilization of services. I do hear the questions about how that would, those pose more complex questions. But I do think staff, obviously, and commissions, I think, makes perfect sense as something where people enter in through a gate where they're asked to state things, and they could decline to state if they choose not to, but it doesn't add a layer.
So you're proposing at this point to bring in the information?
Yes. With a disclaimer and an invitation for people to weigh in, to either, it could be the SEJC email or whatever we think, that I'm not trying to shut people, the users, the consumers of it out of the process of how to make it better, but that by putting it up, we might invite people in, and we'll see how many people do that.
So what would it look like?
Well, I'm just saying, as a commission, I mean, this is something we would have to recommend to the city council, right? That on the application for commissions, that they.
And as a subcommittee, we could draft a proposed revision to the commission application or commission disclosure form. And we could, as a commission, move it forward to the council, which we would want to do probably before the next election.
Before November of 2020.
Yeah, I would imagine, yeah, if we want to capture that next class of commissioners, yeah.
So what do you need from us at this point?
So I guess one question is, do we want to ask council to go ahead and to consider moving forward with simply posting the information we have that the city has collected and must collect, and kind of establishing this as a basis, a framework, and then with a disclaimer that we can suggest, although obviously it is council's discretion, of how to act on that.
I think if I were a council member and got this thrown at me, I would have like a million questions, and, they haven't been involved in this discussion for months, so I think the way that you guys present it is going to be really crucial.
I would think you probably need to draft a little statement to the council as to what you want to do and why you want to do it, what you think it will, will be the result. Because if I were on the council, I would wonder, well, what, we're going to present this information to what end?
Okay.
Yeah, is this information just to daylight this information? Or what is the means to the end with the information?
Yeah.
I mean, generally, when one looks at these kinds of things, it's to identify groups that are, underserved and recognize that being a priority for recruitment.
Yeah, that's easy enough to put into a statement.
Yeah. Good.
Then I wonder, does the commission, would we like to hear from Isabel about kind of how we collect information as a city? Is that okay?
I think I just mentioned
Yeah,
it.
okay.
It's
Yeah, I didn't know if
it's
you
very
had one.
simple.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a form, and that is voluntarily filled out by employees. It's kept separate from all of the other information and kept for statistical purposes. And we use the data, we input the data in our system to generate the EEOC report.
It's reported every 2 years. The point of asking the questions comes at hire, or there's a kind of new cycle of?
No, it's always at higher.
And then
Yes.
that information stays saved.
Yes. Yeah.
So some of the information people filled out, we are lucky to have some longstanding employees, some they filled out a decade or 2 decades ago.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
As long as they
It's a
stay
point in
stable.
time. We need to pull the data by June 30th
Right.
of the year that it's due. So it's due on September 30th. So the data has to include June 30th or the month of June.
And so just to, I think I've got it, but just to make sure I'm not misunderstanding, when we are pulling it in June or in that time period, we're pulling the information that people inputted at their moment of hire. We're not doing a new cycle of request for information.
That's correct. Yes.
So in that sense, if we were to ask the city to ask for additional information, if it were to fit within the format we're using, we would essentially get information on new hires. If the city decided to
Right.
include it, it would essentially be at new hires.
Yes.
And
We couldn't backtrack.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that was my question.
And even including new information would be,
Would raise the question of people's confidentiality.
exactly, and then the system itself, because the system is set up to respond to questions from the EOC. So how to modify the form within the system to include new is a completely different issue that would need to be looked at by IT people. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And then, can I go ahead with, just one more thing that Greg and I have wanted to bring to the Commission's attention with regard to inclusivity is Census 2020. And I was fortunate to be able to attend Supervisor Keith Carson's Census 2020 program and learned quite a bit about what the federal government is planning in terms of collection of data. And it was kind of enlightening. I didn't realize that so much of the census rules are actually embedded in the U.S. Constitution and can't be changed easily. So a lot of the criticisms of how the count is done and how designations are made really kind of go all the way back to federal constitutional law. But the census is going to be very important, not only for understanding who we are as a community in terms of our diversity as defined by the federal government, but also in terms of revenues that we absolutely rely on for many of the programs that we have through the county, through the state, and through the federal government. So we just wanted to let the Commission know, Greg and I as the subcommittee on inclusivity and diversity, that the census counts. And we hope that you guys will talk about that in your everyday lives. So.
Yeah, will the city be doing anything about that when the time comes?
Well, at the meeting, the town hall meeting, there was some talk about basically how can, they were mostly focused on CBOs and churches to do the outreach, and what the city could do is highlight in the e-news and on our website when those outreach events are, but they weren't directing the efforts towards cities. It was mostly the smaller groups to try to outreach to communities that are hard to reach.
There was a deadline of the end of, there was a deadline at the end of October 28th, I believe, to apply for grants for up to $3,000 for community-based organizations that might want to do a census awareness, census promotion program. So if anyone knows anyone or any agencies that might be interested, they should contact the Keith Carson's office, basically.
See, that's where we're always at a disadvantage, is we don't have any community-based organizations to apply for these things. You know, there's There's no organization here that would do that. But I think it would be important for the city to do what it could to encourage people. And I think it's going to take a lot of encouragement for certain groups to feel safe to, to do this and to understand why it's important.
We will continue to collaborate with Supervisor Carson's efforts. We hosted the town hall meeting at the senior center and provided advertisement for the event, and we will continue to collaborate with him and his staff to.
One idea that I had that may or may not be worth considering further is that the city sponsors a Chinese New Year celebration every year, and it would be great to have multilingual information available on the census at that event. And I would volunteer to table it if that happened. So we might want to get $3,000 to do that. I mean, I cost a lot on a table.
One issue that I had heard about the census, and I understand Albany's doing things to mitigate it, but that you wouldn't be counted if you didn't have an address. And that's pretty disturbing.
That's in the U.S. Constitution.
See, things you didn't know.
It's true.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for that. And we look forward to the statement from council for our next meeting, and then we can go ahead with that. And I think that's it, isn't it?
Yep, just future agenda items. I think we're just mostly more subcommittee.
Yeah. So, yeah, we've all got individual subcommittee work to do, and we'll hear more about it. And I think that's it for tonight.
Yeah.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You know,